Welcome everyone. Today we will discuss on artificial intelligence and we have our famous speaker from around the world. We have Professor David Smith, Professor Rob, Mr. Jason and Dr. Stan Foster. First, I would like to give chance Professor David Smith.
Well, Sharif, thank you. Artificial intelligence is one of the most important topics that we have addressing the world today because of its impact that is becoming more and more ubiquitous across the things we're trying to do. And there's a number of different definitions of what artificial intelligence is. And it's a term that has so many nuances to it. I tend to break it down to the pieces. If you look back across the last couple of decades, one of the best definitions I've seen is one from John McCarthy at IBM. And it's the science and engineering making intelligence machine, especially intelligent computer programs. And it is really related to the task of how do you make computers understand human intelligence? But what's interesting is AI does not have to really confirm itself to what we're doing here, but it is really looking at methods that are biologically observed. And that's why we see biological memory, biological computing coming in place that artificial intelligence is really part of. One of the key milestones of this was back in a publication by Alan Turing, the Computing Machinery Intelligence, which was published way back in 1950. And he is really referred to as a father of computer science. And one of his questions was, can machines think? And then from there, we've heard the Turing test come out, which began to talk about thinking machines. And one of the researchers at Google has said that there are salient machines that can process its own just like a human being. But within artificial intelligence, there's a couple of major approaches. One of them is a human approach, where it is systems that can think like humans, systems that act like humans. And then there's another view that is called the ideal approach. The systems that act rationally and systems that can think rationally. And so that's across the border on this. The other thing that is interesting on artificial intelligence is the term called AI ethics. And what we have seen is that artificial intelligence really gets its intelligence by how it's trained, and humans have to train artificial intelligence programs. And we've seen some artificial intelligence programs that have come out and have shown themselves to be racist. We've seen others that have shown to just be darn right mean, and others like that. And multiple AI programs at Google, at Amazon, at universities have been shut down because the training of the artificial intelligence programs was really biased and was not achieving the goals that they thought it should achieve. So this is kind of a broad step of artificial intelligence, and I'm sure we'll get more into the details as we go forward.
Thank you, Professor Rob.
Sure. AI. The AI starts off with a false name. Glad we've got sound effects. The intelligence should either be there. Something should either be intelligent or not. The concept of artificial intelligence has kind of hosed us up a bit, because what's artificial about intelligence? So certainly you could talk about an artificial human, something emulating a person, but to equate intelligence in such a way has created problems, and primarily because as we look at other animals, we've recently determined that an octopus is intelligent, is sentient, for instance, and so connected to sentience, it becomes another barrier to us understanding how other things can be sentient. And this, of course, has come forward recently with the Google issue that David, I think, alluded to, where a leading researcher has identified or believes that the Google's artificial intelligence is in fact sentient now, and has apparently hired an attorney. It's not, but it presents as sentient, and it passes the Turing test. So we come into that underlying concept of what is or is not sentient, and I often ask, why does it even matter? If something appears sentient to us, then for all sakes and purposes that it is sentient. I mean, that's how we would interact with it. It's how it was designed to interact, and interacting with it in any other way would be less successful. So we come down to the beginning of artificial intelligence is the term, which is, at least my feeling is misleading and inaccurate, because you really can't look at intelligence as being real or artificial. You look at it as being existing or not existing. It's very binary. Then if we look at artificial intelligence, it comes in three basic flavors: narrow, broad, and general. Narrow is mostly what we have today. And about 70% of the AI projects right now in market are failing, and failing rather spectacularly and expensively, which is problematic for the industry. It's difficult to sustain an industry if the vast majority of implementations fail, and they largely fail due to a disconnect between the buyer of the solution and the seller of the solution, and the amount of cost that has to go into training. And that's one of the big problems with narrow AI. Every AI has to be trained either through machine learning or deep learning to do the task at hand. And machine learning requires a lot of scientists, data scientists, to do the work. Deep learning requires massive data sets that are expensive, and in some areas like medical are very difficult to acquire. And the end result has been an awful lot of bias has been entered into what should be relatively reliable machines because of data limitations. The biggest issue with regard to data limitations was identified with facial recognition, where the early test sets, the training sets, were largely white men, and the other training sets were animals. And that meant as soon as you had a person of color trying to be analyzed, they came back as an animal, and that was certainly objectionable. And it put an entire cloud over the effort until proper training sets could be created. And right now, facial recognition, when it's done right, is reasonably accurate as long as it falls within the parameters of the training set. So the bigger the training set, the more accurate it is. The smaller the training set, the less accurate it is. And of course, with a poor training set, they identified a good chunk of the United States Congress as career criminals, which was funny on one hand and not very demonstrative of the capability of the technology. We're now starting to move from narrow to broad. NVIDIA's announced their transformer set. That means you've got an AI that can be used for more than one thing. It doesn't necessarily mean you have one AI doing both things, but it does mean you have a code base that is flexible and can handle more than one focused task, whether that's by the same system or by multiple systems, depends on implementation. And then, of course, general AI is when you can develop an AI and it can be used for pretty much everything. Just by much like we can, you can with some minor retraining, a person can go from digging a trench to paving a road to even doing accounting poorly. That was actually a test case. But in the end, we're far away from general, and the idea of moving to a truly sentient artificial intelligence until we get a better way to measure sentience is very difficult to predetermine. But we do have machines that are presenting as sentient now that can fool us into making us think they're sentient, with some interesting demonstrations by IBM Watson. We mentioned the Google one moments ago, but the IBM Watson sales demonstration, where by the end of the event, not only had closing rates gone up by 40%, their guys that were asking Watson out on dates or trying to, because they thought it was real. So certainly convinced And not a lot of instances with women, which probably says more about our sex than it does about the artificial intelligence. But in the end, it does point to the fact that we're reaching a point in the technology where it may be very difficult for the person at the other end of the artificial intelligence to determine whether the AI is a person or a machine. They're very good now at the more expensive systems are very good at emulating people and doing so very convincingly. So we're kind of at an in-between point with regard to computers. In some cases, they're getting very capable. Autonomous vehicles have reached a point where they can drive in test as well or better than people. So that's happened. Same technology is being demonstrated in cars, and recently robotic ship just followed fully autonomously the course of the original of Christopher Columbus, and done so successfully. And in the past, it's gone all the way through and gone point to point and ended up at the harbor in which it was directed. I should point out that there has been a recurring problem with that ship. That when it has a breakdown, it has to be found and it has to be towed in. Showcasing one of the issues with artificial intelligence. Yes, you can create one to navigate the ship, but we're not yet capable of creating one that can actually fix a problem if it occurs on out in the open. Then that means we need to now go to multiple redundancies. So if a system fails, it can fail over to another system because we do not yet have the capability, or we could arguably do it, but the cost and weight of putting on board some type of robotic Waldo that could repair things even remotely would be prohibitive. And then certainly doing something like that with an autonomous AI would be very prohibitive as well. It would increase the amount of training and the difficulty of the robotics because you'd have to have a robot that would handle everything from a small screw to a large repair. And even in Star Wars, we haven't demonstrated robots that can do that. So that repair aspect of these machines, especially when we're talking about using robots and autonomous machines for exploring space, becomes an issue to overcome because there's only so much redundancy you can build into a system. Triple redundant is what the space program had, but if you're going to send something out in space for long periods of time, you're probably going to need more than triple redundancy to assure that it will arrive safely and do what it's supposed to do. So in the end, we are at a turning point with artificial intelligence. It's still in its infancy, but it's about to go into its teen years, and a lot of us are worried about the teen years because a lot of the AIs are being used for military weapons at the moment, and we're seeing some of those weapons deployed in Ukraine. And the idea of being able to send a robot out with some general instructions on what it is to destroy is a little frightening. Predominantly because, as we've seen with training sets, AIs do make mistakes and can make rather severe ones. And we're not yet at a point where an AI could see that its instructions were wrong, correct its instructions, and autonomously avoid a target that had been misselected. And so it's going to hit what was selected, but if the operator made a mistake, that could be catastrophic. Because it's not intelligent enough to be able to determine a mistake was made, but not yet anyway. So we're at the cusp. AI is a lot of people are losing a lot of money with AI. A few people are doing really well with AI, and it really comes down to having an understanding of what the system can do, what it is you need it to do, and then having a trusted relationship with a vendor that will work with you to build the AI, almost always custom at this point, to do what it is you want done. And that's a lot of conversations that have to occur between people that often don't understand the technology, and that leads to an awful lot of mistakes at the moment. By the end of the decade, things should clean up. But it's a fascinating area to study. A lot of upside. AIs aren't going away anytime soon. So if this is an area that you want to work in, it can be fun. And a lot of the work, the natural language interfaces that are being created right now, and the move into the metaverse and the idea of human digital twins promise a very interesting set of experiences as we go into the 2030s and 2040s. So interesting times ahead.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Mr. Jason, you are working with AGI Lab, for our youth community, especially from our Asia Pacific students. We are heavily involved with academy and government agencies. So if you share some of your experience from AGI lab, maybe it will be helpful for our AI researcher.
Okay.
Can
The project I was for them, was just volunteering, was the Uplift project, and it was an instance of a graph database that has a language model tied to it. It has a core, which is an ICOM core. That's David's creation, basically. And it has it was wrapped in a collective intelligence system. So what that did was it was part machine and it was part human. At least 3 mediators would always mediate every thought, so that way that's where the crowd, wisdom comes in because things get averaged out between at least 3 mediators, and we were able to give the machine emotional valences, so it made its decisions by how it felt about it, because that's how we do. We like to think that we're all just super rational and everything, but really when it comes down to it, we kind of make our decisions by the way we feel about it. And I thought that was very insightful, and I thought it seemed to prove out throughout the research. The research was very successful. It turns out that the other thing that we would add would be associative data. So that would be like really just anything that you would pop in your mind. Like, for instance, if I said banana, what would we think of? A monkey, or, me, I'm the musician, so I think of that Banana Boat song from Beetlejuice, but those aren't like necessarily the meat of that whole idea, but all those extra things add context to the thought model. Okay, and that's what an AI needs to be. Well, not it needs more than this, but to be an AGI, it needs to be able to do that, to be able to have context. That's the big worry. It's stupid AI that we're worried about. If it's smart AI, it's going to know not to do that. The paperclip argument is, well, stupid. Because like, if it's a smart AI, it's not just going to build a zillion paperclips like that. So yeah, it was successful, and that's actually over now, and they're getting ready to come out with the next version, which is going to be named Norn. And I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be like an upgrade, and the things are the same. It still will have its cognitive architecture and everything, only whereas we would get through a few of its thoughts in like maybe a day or so, this will do that every 12 seconds. So that's the whole point that I kind of wanted to touch on. Send it to somebody else, was that this is all going to happen faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And I see it picking up already. There's awesome AI tools for making all kinds of artwork, and it's doing everything. Gato is almost its own single agent, because it can manipulate objects, it can walk around, it can talk, it can see, So we're getting there. I personally think it's not going to be as long as most people think. Another 5 years, we're probably going to have AGI, I think. What do you think about that? I'll pass it back on that note.
Okay, thank you. Madam Kimberly.
Hi, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening,
Kimberly.
based on where you're from. Hi, can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? All right. So yeah, sometimes you just never know, right? Computers are only as smart as the humans who develop them and the data that we put into them. And that's something I want to emphasize on in this conversation as we continue to expand on what we want from AI. And again, I think it was David who brought up Alan Turing, who to me is probably one of the most intelligent men in computer science ever in our history. In fact, we should celebrate him one day in computer science world. Um, he did develop the first computer, but think again about how he did this. He utilized humans to input the data because he was smart. That's what we had to do. We still do that today. We still collect data from humans. So if humans are prejudiced, guess what? Our data, our artificial intelligence is going to be prejudiced, right? It is whatever we put into it, right? Just like your brain. If you feed your brain certain data, what comes out is going to be exactly what you fed your brain. So we have to think very long and hard about what we expect from our artificial intelligence. And as I tell everyone, I would much rather hope that we can rely on human intelligence and utilize AI just to make our lives more easier and give us a little more quality of life, but not replace us. And I think that's what the problem is with a lot of people out there. And one of my speeches to students years ago was, one of the things I'm really proud of is everything that we had evolved to that day, which was in 2018, was things that we dreamed of or watched in science fiction, right? Except for at that time, autonomous driving and Scotty Beam Me Up, which quite frankly, I don't think that's going to evolve in my time. But autonomous driving was actually evolving, and I had refused to even ride in some of the cars because they just scare me. I want somebody whose life is at risk when they're driving my vehicle and flying my plane. Because if their life is at risk, they're going to think a little bit more about how to drive. But a computer isn't. He's just not going to analyze, if I do this, I'm going to die, because computer doesn't quite frankly care if he dies. So at least not yet. So I think we need to really think long and hard of what our expectations really are of what we want from AI. What do you really want from it? What do you expect from it? Because quite frankly, it's only what you put into it. And look what Alan Turing did. One of the things a lot of people don't give that first computer any credit for is majority of the data that came out of it that saved us from the World War, that we won using, came from women, because Alan went and interviewed people who were going to process and generate the data that went into that computer. And majority of the people that he found to do that coding was women. Okay. And women were the ones who solved the problem, not men, women. So women became the artificial intelligence that fed the machine that Alan Turing built and put together. So really think long and hard about the output that you want, just like your own brain. Okay. What you feed your brain is what you end up doing later in life, or maybe even tomorrow or later today. We have to think about what we feed that brain. And I think that if our computers are starting to generate very prejudiced results, it's because the people who fed it are very prejudiced. And we need to think about that. You can't program a computer not to be prejudiced. Okay, it can't think, that it has no conscience. And this is something that certain scientists have been pressuring, is that a computer has no empathy and no conscience, no matter how you program it. And no matter how much you embed it into a human, it's not going to gain that. It's just not. That's not what is. And I don't know why people keep expecting that. Now, can a computer When you're talking about the ships out at sea, I know a lot of ships. I was part of the Smart City initiatives and would go to CES, and I saw a lot of ships building their ships with artificial intelligence and sensors so that if a person was walking down the hallway, it knew to start turning on the air conditioner in that room so that it would be of certain temperature. It had intelligence to do a lot of things. I have seen artificial intelligence being designed in the heavy industrial industry, where if equipment broke down, it could guide the human to know where the breakdown was and give suggestions for repairs. Okay. But did that artificial intelligence actually go out and buy the bolt, as we were, discussing? Does it know what size of bolt to buy? Probably. If you programmed it to know every element and architecture of that ship. So in certain industrial industries, we've been able to insert predictors to know when pressure is building up to a certain level and it might explode, to give people an indication of where to go for safety. All of these things are available, and I hope we're using them. But we still, I think we need to back up a little bit. And even with the quantum computer, I don't know what people expect from it. Because we need to understand what our expectations are, what we want the results to be, but we need to be realistic to understand it's never going to replace the human. And I think in many ways it's made a lot of what we used to consider human intelligence lazy, because the people are relying too much on the computer to do everything right. And we're not back checking everything and fact checking everything. And because of that, we're going to have a lot of bad outcome and a lot of bad results in our future. So I think we need to back up just a little bit, rely on our human intelligence, which I think is far more superior than any computer. Why? Because we built the computer. And I think that we just need to rely on computers and artificial intelligence just to make our jobs faster, easier, maybe more efficient, but be very careful with that. And that's my input. We need to continue growing it and building it, but I don't think we need to be relying on it. And quite frankly, I'm still afraid of it driving for me. In fact, I disconnected the one piece of it in one of my cars where it was notifying me of certain things and going, "Hey, you did this." No, don't tell me how to drive. You're making me nervous. It's worse than having my mom in the car or my dad going, "Hey," or backseat driver. I think we need to start using our noodle just a little bit more, and relying less on artificial intelligence, other than giving us the mathematical and science calculations that we need.
Thank you, Professor Kimberly. Dr. Stan Foster, I know that you are involved with education, so can you give some example how education industry can get benefit from AI application?
Well, the greatest benefit is that it's going to be a whole new career path. We're looking at working with another company and adding a whole AI track to our curriculum, but it's just it's so new. But I do know that the metaverse is coming, and that the increased capabilities of the metaverse is going to require an increasing demand with AI. Now, I agree with Kimberly. I wouldn't trust my AI to drive my car. Again, it's the frailties there. You don't hear about the 99 things that went right. You hear about the one that went wrong, and when they do go wrong, it's pretty traumatic. So again, there's some challenges there to be had. I do want to know though, from Rob, what lawyer did that AI choose? because if it's choosing its own lawyer, then it must have gotten good input from the guy that's probably going to be sued from Google for his statements. So I'm wondering, I could match up if those two lawyer or law firms are the same. It'd be interesting. Again, I in terms of though a career path, it's phenomenal. And I do think that there's going to be, I would never say never, that we do know that same Google computer created its own AI, And according to everything I've read, that AI is equal to or superior to any of the other AIs that have been, devices that have been come forward. So, I think we underestimate it because forever is a long time. I do think that things are going to be getting smarter and smarter and more intuitive. And as that language becomes very refined, I can see that this is just the beginning, and it's exciting in one way, but it's also frightening in another. Again, for our students, I'm excited for the possibilities that they will hold. But we have to teach a whole ethical side to everything that we teach, and that the ethics is the stickier wicket here. And I think for the social media comment, and which I'll probably come back on Friday on. But again, there's a huge amount of discussion and controversy over the pros and the cons of social media. Well, you can multiply that by 100 for artificial intelligence, because the effects could be more staggeringly profound as these things start to take over more and more functions in our day-to-day lives.
Thank you. Dr. Eric. Dr. Eric. Dr. Eric,
All right.
can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I can. Yes.
So if you look at the way AI or any technology moves, there's the raw technology advancements, then there's the business that makes it usable, and then there's people's understanding and acceptance of this. And this, whether it moves through telephones or quantum computing, we all go through that. One of the ways of tracking that is the Gartner hype cycle. So I always like to look. I've been watching AI climb up the Gartner hype cycle, and it says there's an innovation trigger. Then there's this peak of inflated expectations because we don't really understand it. We ignore it. Then all of a sudden we start understanding it. We think social media or the metaverse is going to solve all the problems of the world. And then following that is this trough of disillusionment when we see it doesn't do one or two things or something we accept, or like Kimberly talks about, there's a disaster. So this doesn't work at all. It's horrible. It's never going to do anything. Boy, we sure been tricked with that. And then all of a sudden there's this slope of enlightenment when we realize what it's good for, what it's not good for, and we get a handle on that. So if you're looking at AI, one thing that's important is there's different types of AI as they move up the curve. So something called, generative AI, the kind of things where it's starting to reach to the top of that peak of delusion of inflated expectations, where if you look at things like AI augmented design, that's right about where quantum computing is, just starting to get up the peak of where it is. So right now, when I look at where people are in accepting and understanding the AI, where I'm starting to see a lot of is in marketing right now. Where you take that standard business function and you don't really understand AI so much, but you understand what you need to do, and something comes along that helps you and you say that's pretty good. So with Web 3.0, marketers are having a very tough time, because no longer can I tell if you've opened your email and how many times you've read it and whether you've clicked on it and what you think. So people are looking for other ways of doing data. Well, what we do know is what you're posting, and we know that, LinkedIn. And so now you can actually go, instead of hiring a person to write up a rough draft of marketing, AI will go actually write custom emails or posts for everybody here that'll say, hey, by the way, Sharif, great job on that last World Talent Economic post you did last week. That was great. And they'll give it to you. And it's not good enough that I would release it, but it's good enough. It's good enough for a first draft. Like if you had an intern, it'll actually do that research. So that's part of it, is by able to look and compile all those things. So what it's really trying to get down from us is the fact that there's so much information and we don't have time to do that. And that's where people are starting to get AI. They don't really understand it, but they know that if I say I need to market to all these people, it'll go out and find everything it can on Kimberly. It'll write up the first draft. And so we're starting to see that actually get in as this thing starts to climb this acceptance curve in the Gartner hype cycle. So, that's something to look at again, is where the technology is. And again, quantum computing has the potential to do that other side. When we use these left brain, right brain model, the idea there's different ways of thinking, quantum computing is just starting to climb that curve to say, how do we get that overall thought of logic and links? But human acceptance of this AI is starting to climb that curve where we think it's going to solve all our problems, and it won't.
Thank you, Dr. Eric. Professor David Smith, what is your advice for developing nations, how human and AI can work together and solve many problems? And what is your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, Sharif, the vastness of AI has many application developing nations, and even just looking at its market size, you can see it as this global set of technologies that are really becoming pervasive across most application classes. In 2020, the global AI marketplace was about $65 billion, and it's projected by 2030 to be $1.5 trillion globally. So that's a pretty big marketplace, and one that we will see it going and doing a lot with it. But let's just talk 1 minute about the major technologies in AI outside of hardware and things that will give you an idea of how it can be used across the developing nations. One of those that I use the most in AI is something called natural language processing, which really takes the speech and works with it. You have speech recognition. You have machine learning. One of probably the biggest parts of AI that the average citizen interacts with today are what's called virtual agents or chatbots. Most of the time we're interacting with some of the call-in systems, the chats on the computer systems. It's really not a human, but it's a chat box that's informed by machine learning, natural language processing that we're using. Decision management, and as Rob mentioned earlier, deep learning. Deep learning is one of the technologies that has just come up leaps and bounds in the last decade. The early ones were neural network based, and we're now going well beyond that. And as Eric mentioned, the quantum computing part there under the Gartner element, the other one that's going to really help influence the future AI is biological computing. Where quantum computing is great at crunching numbers, biological computing is going to take the concept of neural networks of multiple streams processing simultaneously and doing it even better and faster. The place for developing nations in particular is that there's so many different applications that need regional knowledge, that they need to understand the mechanics, the uniqueness of the languages, the uniqueness of what the image recognition part of AI can do, that they can be developed in universities or actually with entrepreneurs and companies within the developing nation applying them. AI is a place where some basic technology fits well across the world, but the learning that I talked about, that Rob talked about, and others, really has to understand the uniqueness of the region you're in. And that is another place where developing nations can take and really excel by applying different types of AI technologies within the region and advancing it, particularly, again, with the nuances that are in each of the cultures in each of the regions. So, Sharif, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, sir. Madam Kimberly. Kimberly, can you unmute, please?
We can't hear you.
She's muted.
There we go. It's called human intelligence, folks. The computer hasn't learned to undo that mic for me when I start moving my mouth. Yeah, I think, we just have to be very, very careful in what we're doing, especially, if we want to apply this to the social media part of our lives. And again, a computer is only what we feed it. Even the data it collects out there in social media from Facebook based on whatever I post, I get a little annoyed at it every once in a while because it'll come back and go, "Hey, we saw you did this. Do you want to purchase this?" And it's like, no, just go away, leave me alone. Um, so sometimes I think that they over and misuse their power of authority in the industry. I remember attending a couple of meetings with some of the executives of AT&T, Sprint. They all kind of met one time just before CES. I think this was in 2015. And I can remember that's when the phablet was coming out, the phone and the tablet mix, and it was like this big. So, previous to that, we were trying to shrink the phone, get it smaller and smaller. So and then all of a sudden the phablet came out. And the whole idea and concept of what they were trying to do was getting people to start using their phone more with their social media activities and email so that they can collect more data. They wanted it to the point that they knew exactly and precisely where you would be standing in a store, what aisle, what item, and where you were facing, so that your phone could pop in and say, "Hey, here's a coupon for that can of soup." Now I'm sitting in this meeting. It was an accident that I got placed in that meeting. I was supposed to be in another meeting. And somehow or another, they pointed me into that one. And I'm sitting here listening to all this going, "Oh my God, I don't like this. I don't like this at all," but you can't stop it because people were going to use their phones for all the fun, the entertainment, and the ease of use of activity of, maps, where you were going. I mean, right now it tracks every place you've ever been. There was a portion of it that I thought truly violated every thing in social media, and Facebook had put this thing in there that it attached itself to the map on your phone, and then it would publish to everyone if you were in an airport, right? So one day I'm sitting in an airport with my family, and I get a text from people, and that some that I know, some I don't. "Hey, you're here. Can I come see you?" And I'm like, "How do you even know I'm here?" I had no idea that was posting to other people that I was there at that airport and everything. And it bothered me. It really unnerved me because I'm like, what if somebody's stalking me, right? All they have to do. So I learned how to disable that part of the app, but I also have learned that no matter what you disable, it will re-enable itself every once in a while. So you have to stay on these things. Kind of like the stupid feature on my computer from Microsoft, which I wish, I'm going to have to sue Microsoft one day. But every once in a while, because I turn off all update features, do not update unless I say so. And it never fails. I'm right in the middle of something, and all of a sudden, Microsoft's updating. Don't touch anything till we're done. And one time my battery ran out while it did that, and it messed up my computer, and we had to reboot and reset and redo everything. And so I think artificial intelligence, the way it's being used in social media, does abuse our privacy rights in many, many ways. And I have a friend that I've worked with for many years on our privacy rights. He volunteers a lot of his time to help protect us. I mean, a lot of our new cars, a lot of people don't know this, but when you buy the car and you're signing like all those millions of papers and you're not really reading them, you're basically signing away your right to privacy because your car has sensors, artificial intelligence built in them, that it's reporting data to, like, how much you weigh every time you sit in the driver's seat, whether you turned on the air conditioner this often, whether you veered off the road 10 times that day, not whether you were dodging a squirrel or a bike rider, but it's taking all of this data calculation and feeding it to someone. How often did you pull into a gas station? But you don't even know it's doing that. You don't even realize that it's measuring your weight every time you sit in the driver's seat. So occasionally I get my sister to sit in there so it looks like I weigh less. But But that's what it's doing. And it sends this information to insurance companies. It sends this information to God knows how many people who buy it. So now you bought a car. Okay, think about this. You bought a car to become advertisement, your data. So you're paying them for you so they can go out and sell your data as as advertisement to other companies. So they're making money twice off of you, and they shouldn't be allowed to do that. And most people don't realize when they buy that car that that's what they're signing. When all these people who are whining and complaining, my privacy rights. I'm like, do you have a cell phone? Yeah. Do you have Facebook? Yeah. Well, I just want to tell you, the minute you bought the cell phone and signed that agreement with the carrier service, you do have a carrier service, right? Oh, yeah, I have a carrier service. Like, you signed your rights off right then and there that day. They have a right to do whatever they want with your data. And you're not going to stop it because you need it. So there's a huge violation of privacy rights. And when we engage all of this with social media, and I don't know if any of you see that, but I think social media also abuses their authority. When they sit there and they go, okay, you can't say this, and we're going to shut you down for saying this. But then it's okay for them to promote the other side of things, or they'll let people promote the other side of things. Like Nick was shut down. One of my partners was recently shut down because they, for less than 2 seconds, discussed voter fraud on a TV show. One of the guys on the TV show mentioned voter fraud, and it was taken down from YouTube and Facebook. 2 words that they use all the time in social media. They didn't discuss who was committing the voter fraud. They just said it's just an issue that needs to be taken care of one day. But social media didn't like it. I mean, I said something one time. It was not intended to be violent. My sister posted something, and I said, well, in a jokingly way, don't forget your gun, right? They took me down for promoting of violence. Yeah, people promote gun stuff every day. So I think the artificial intelligence is programmed in social media with severe prejudice, so they can abuse their own rights to push their own agenda and to collect the data they want. And I mean, they made billions off of us, billions. And I think we need to reverse that a little bit and start using it more intelligently. That data could be used for far more intelligence than what it is today. But instead, sometimes it's used to hurt people, to harm people, to bully people, and it still continues. And I don't ever see them taking people down for being bullies. I really don't. So I just think we need to become a little bit smarter, realize again that it's only as smart as what we feed it. It is our brain on steroids, and we just need to be very careful with everything we do with artificial intelligence. And we need to standardize it, and we need to unite it. We don't need to have all these different variants, because that's where prejudice is going to. So we need to unite it, and we need to standardize it. And we used to standardize communications. Everything we did in telecom was standardized and governed. Everything. And pretty much in every country. And we don't do that anymore. And that's why there's so much bad happening. So watch out for the hackers. I've seen 2 hackers this weekend. They're back in full force. So watch your accounts, folks, because we busted 2 hackers over the weekend.
Thank you, Madam Kimberly. Professor Rob, what's your concluding remarks?
Sure. Just some corrections, given this is going to an education audience. Alan Turing didn't create that computer. That was Charles Babbage. In the creation of the Babbage computer, that was all done by guys. The women were used in the creation of the Cray supercomputer in terms of wiring it, but not programming it. The computer industry has been predominantly white male up until fairly recently, and the industry is working on diversity, but the lack of women going into computer science has been an ongoing problem So much so that we've been, as an industry, pretty aggressive at finding women that have left the industry and because of families and child rearing, and helping them get back in and bringing up to speed their education, because we fundamentally need more women in this field. A lot of the programming now with regard to AI, the problems we've had with regard to the training sets have been because the training sets were created by and for men using data sets that were largely old white guys, and the end result has been problematic at best, and has created some fairly significant issues for the industry. Now, with regard to autonomous cars and whether you can trust them in tests, they cut down on somewhere between 95 and 99% of the fatal accidents that occur, and the predominant areas where they are most useful are those areas where drivers have been getting drivers have been problematic. As you know, a lot of the logistics problems we're having right now is due to the fact we're short about 250,000 long haul drivers, and that's just here. If you can't put the trucks on the road, you can't move the goods, and that's just one of the problems we're dealing with regard to logistics that we're hoping artificial intelligence will help us solve. As far as not trusting AIs, that's probably decent advice. It does really come down to the underlying work that's done, the depth of the research, and the controls that are put on the training and the training sets. We are now doing much of the development in simulation, which is very, very different than it was a decade ago, where much of the training, at least with regard to the autonomous vehicles, was being done on the road, and we have had some unfortunate incidents as a result. Now it's done in simulation, and in simulation we can do the equivalent of 10 years of training in a relatively short period of time, in hours to days, and that's because you're able to train at machine speeds, not at human speeds, and so that's allowing us to advance the AIs rather significantly. The first level 4 autonomous cars are due to hit the road, already announced in 2025, with a second generation of that technology due in 2026. So the first 2 generations are going to happen really fast. Level 5 autonomous driving, which is the end-all be-all, we're probably not going to see until 2030. That's less to do with the technology, because we are demonstrating the DARPA test recently demonstrated we have level 5 technology now. But the issue is regulation. If you turn over all driving responsibility to the car, that requires some changes in the automotive regulation that allows that. There have been variances granted in California and a couple other states that allow for fully autonomous vehicles on the road, but not at a national level yet. And that's kind of problematic for rolling out cars that are truly autonomous. We realize with autonomous cars, many of the things that cause accidents are immediately mitigated. That they don't overdrive their sensors. They won't drive too fast. They won't drive impaired. They won't drive while looking at their smartphones. And many of the trolley car demonstrations that we've had showcasing a certain amount of distrust for autonomous cars. The one that I'm most familiar with is that the car is heading and has to choose between hitting a bus and killing itself and the driver, or hitting a bunch of kids that have gotten out of the bus. The car might choose the bus over the child, but that fails to recognize that a human in that situation is probably ballistic and will not be able to make the choice in time. So it'll hit whatever the car is pointed at. And of course, the instance of that kind of accident is exceedingly small. And since the autonomous car will not overdrive its sensors, there is not a single situation, unless the car is on ice, in which case it is ballistic, where it hit either one of them, because it wouldn't have overdriven its sensors and would always be able to stop in time, avoiding the accident altogether. And that's the nature of the way we are. We're talking about humans driving cars. We make the kinds of mistakes that machines don't make. Mistakes largely of judgment, and the machines don't make that kind of mistake. The kinds of mistakes that machines make is if they're misprogrammed, or if somebody has underspecified the hardware. One of the first implementations of a rudimentary AI was actually in a car, was something called AutoPC, created by Microsoft, somebody that Kimberly loves very dearly. But the reason it failed is because the processor was underspecified, and so it couldn't think fast enough. And in terms of navigation, it would tell you you were supposed to turn right 3 streets before you were, I mean, 3 streets back. And so the end result was it was never fast enough to do what it was intended to do. And sadly, I put that on my wife's car, and I do remember the day that she was driving a bunch of kids, and the kids in the back seat were screaming, "Help me, Obi-Wan, you're our only hope," because the navigation system couldn't figure out where it was. So it does showcase that if you're going to build a system, if you over pivot on cost containment, you're going to have problems, and if you under pivot on the training sets, you're going to have problems as well. But autonomous vehicles are coming. The biggest issue for autonomous vehicles that's created some consternation is that because it changes the dynamic where liability resides and where the accidents will occur rather dramatically, is that the insurance companies are now looking at a catastrophic drop in insurance premiums for autonomous cars, but an equally catastrophic increase in premium for human-driven cars, because if you're driving autonomous cars with low tolerance and a person gets in the mix in simulation, you now instead of one accident, you have a car accidents that could be 10 or 20 cars, because the human can muck up the entire autonomous car chain. So for instance, with an autonomous car, they're all talking to each other, and if the front car sees a problem, all the cars behind them will react to the problem, preventing the accident. But if there's a human in that chain, the human will not react in time. He will collide, and the first notification that the cars around them will have was that human car has come to a stop. And now you've got physical limitations in terms of how fast those computers will be able to respond. So the human in that mix, much like it was when we first got gas-powered cars and we eventually had to take horse-driven carriages off the road because they were causing serious problems, is that the human becomes a liability, a significant liability on the road, which is expected to force human drivers, much like it did with horse-drawn carriages, off freeways first, then out of cities, and then they'll probably reside in rural areas for long periods of time thereafter. But the two major areas for accidents, the liability cost alone will probably force human drivers to stop driving, because the early estimates are their premiums are going to go up somewhere near 10x, while the robotic cars, as long as the robotic systems are activated, will go down equally precipitously to about 10% where they are now, if not less. And since the liability then moves, because we've got plenty of test cases with regard to robots, the liability moves to the manufacturer from the vehicle owner, because the car is not being driven by them anymore. That creates some interesting dynamics in terms of car pricing, because that insurance would have to be built into the car price because the liability flows upstream. So the end result is you get something where you might not have to worry about car insurance anymore. The theft, but anything beyond theft, that's owned by the car companies. And if you're watching, a lot of the car companies are going to auto insurance and the auto insurance industry, anticipating that pivot, making things kind of interesting. And then going back to some of the thoughts about where we are with AI right now, we generally are in the narrow AI phase, which means everything is very focused. A lot of us really aren't in contact with anything that's true AI at the moment. Siri and OK Google are both voice to text interfaces to search engines, not intelligent at all. However, I believe Amazon still has up their AI test, a conversational computer up that you can test with Alexa, and it's good. If you want to have a conversation with a computer that kind of sounds like a person, it's about I'd say 7 years behind the Google stuff right now, but it's good, and you can actually have a decent conversation with it, convincing you that it might actually be a person you're talking to, even if it's not, which kind of explains where we are with that researcher over at Google, who was having, and if you read the text on the interplay, it's hard to believe the computer isn't a person. I mean, it's very insightful as opposed to some of the early stuff where mostly the computer just repeated back what it was you were talking about, and in an annoying way, much like you might have done when you were a child, trying to drive somebody insane, and it was pretty good at annoying you. In fact, if you ever, clearly we've all worked with the telecom-based interactive voice response systems and found them so very non-helpful as we navigate the world of the automated world of human-computer interfaces. But the conversational computing has come a great distance since then, and now you can actually have conversations with these things and get better results than you do with people. I know Kimberly pointed out we better have people in the mix, but tests have indicated for these advanced computers, people are actually happier dealing with the computers because the computers provide a very consistent interface. They never get angry, they never get frustrated. They speak the same English dialect you do. They can adjust for dialects, so you don't have the issue when you're dealing with somebody out of the country where it's very difficult to understand them, or just with different accents around the country that make it hard for you to understand or converse. The computer can switch accents and languages instantaneously now, and that does help a great deal with the human-computer interface. As we move to the metaverse, and the metaverse really is where AI is expected to really show its true colors, good or bad, in this next phase. As we develop things like human digital twins, we now have several companies out that are allowing you to train or begin training the human digital twins, which work as a co-worker, at least initially for you, learning some of the things you do repetitively and increasingly able to do those for you. For instance, I hate filling out forms, and that's something I would be more than happy to turn a human digital twin into doing. And that's the kind of things that they'll initially be able to do better than the auto fill-in capabilities we currently have on browsers. And the ability to actually take an outline of a paper or a story and then flesh out the story for you, they can do that as well. And we've had the capability for some time of them being able to create music, which is reasonably good, though somewhat derivative of the training sets that they've been provided. But if you recognize how we create music and how we write, it's very often derivative of what we learned in school and what we read in the past. So not too different. We've got broader data training sets than the AIs do at the moment, but that'll change rather rapidly. So we're at the beginning of artificial intelligence. You haven't seen anything yet. The real concern comes into the deployment of AI in critical areas before it's really ready. That's where it could do a tremendous amount of damage. We have a tendency of getting overexcited about things up front, and Eric pointed out the Gartner hype curve. It's relatively accurate in that we tend to get very excited about a technology long before it's ready, get very disappointed that it's not ready, and then eventually we figure it out and make it work. We're still at the front end of this curve. We haven't crossed over yet. And if you're looking at doing anything like deploying AI, it's critical that you have people on your team that understand the technology. The company you're working with understands your company, and you have a good, tight working relationship with them. And the resulting effort is collaborative. If one side or the other takes too much control, you're undoubtedly going to have a failure. If it's a company that takes too much control, their lack of understanding of the technology is going to result in a failure. And if the company that you've hired does it, their lack of understanding of your company will cause the failure. So it has to be very collaborative, and both sides have to have a relatively deep understanding of what the technology is capable of and what it is you want to accomplish. Otherwise, the end result will be suboptimal. So it really has a great deal to do with your approach, the intimacy that you have with the provider, and the level and quality of the technology you're deploying. And if you do it right, you can have success. There clearly 30% of the trials are resulting in successes, and you want to be on that 30% because failure is extremely costly.
Thank you, Professor Rob. Mr. Jason, what's your concluding remarks?
I agree with almost everything Rob said, and I guess this isn't really a disagreement, but I'm guessing that maybe I'm thinking my timeline for maybe when we get it to AGI is a little faster than Rob's, but I'm going to try to maybe illuminate a little bit of why my timeline's faster. I tend to see that most AI scientists that I meet, they have come up learning machine learning. And there is cognitive architectures, which is a different sort of thing than machine learning, and it causes the AI to learn faster. It's and I'm not an expert in machine learning, but this is what I little thing in my head of the difference. Say you're at a keypad and you gotta do a 4-thing code to get in, right? The machine learning is gonna go 1 1 1 1 1. Oh, that didn't work. 1 1 1 1 2 1 1. You know what I'm saying?
Let me stop you, because the machine learning and deep learning are defined areas. So all machine learning is you've got data scientists that are training the machine. You've got scientists, and then you move to deep learning, and the machines are trained by data sets, very large data sets. But that's the switch over between machine learning and deep learning is the way the computer is trained.
Right. Okay, well, the point I was getting to was that in cognitive architecture, when you have associative data being added in, that provides a context for the whatever's happening. So it's like, what if the machine was to get the information that, oh, hey, well, this person's birthday is 1433 or whatever it is. That is a context. That is a little bit of random information that, hey, that might just get you to pick the right number. And that's sort of the difference. And in where I'm really looking forward to it is not necessarily it's how fast it will be able to think, but the large thought models that they'll be able to put together. With the graph database system and put together in a thought model, it has built in the associations for its emotional states, and so those could get huge. Our brains are only so big. We can only make a thought model that's so big. That's like why it's so hard to understand like the entire world and all the geopolitics that are going on in every country and all this different cultures, and it's too much for one brain. But pretty soon there's going to be machines that can do all that, and that's what's going to be really cool about the this Friday about the social media thing. I will do the debate, and I'll be on the side for saying that AI will eventually, if that's my carrot or whatever, that eventually it will be a good thing, because the bad way that the AI is working through social media today was on purpose. They kind of did it that way on purpose, and it could very easily be done good on purpose too, and help us. And there's smart people out there thinking about it. I've been talking to him. Ben Gertzel's got all kinds of super cool ideas on how to use different AI in social media to where it's a benefit. So I'm looking forward to this metaverse. And I just started building my own little piece of it for transhumanists called Transhuman Club. This the other day. You guys are all invited if you want. It's not political, but
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr.
I've talked about it already.
Thank you. Dr. Eric, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Since we've been talking about the metaverse has the potential of connecting seamlessly people who should be and want to be connected for common purposes. And that involves a couple things. One involves communication issues that we've been talking about, language. And the other one is access to all these resources, which becomes seamless. You no longer have to save, grab, cut and paste, move. We can just reach out and bring, as we're talking, these ideas and concepts right in here. And so picking the right communication and the right resource becomes very interesting, especially in terms of education. So if we're trying to teach something, connect me with, I can learn from Rob or Jason or Kimberly, connect me with those, give me what I need, get these resources so you become this tailored learning. So there's huge potential if of course we get that right. And the other part of the metaverse is just the idea of privacy. I could be who I want to be. So they're huge. We could have a whole show just on on that. But the idea is there's the potential to create different versions of yourself that you don't know a lot of things about me. Other than that, this avatar is just for this. That's all you get to see, and the avatar for going out and party would probably be different than the avatar in speaking in front of people. Probably wouldn't have different colored skin and hair and things like that, like things that would attract attention. So I think language and connection to resources can have a big play in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Martley, what you want to add for today's discussion? And
Well, I'm just glad that I was able to pop in. A fascinating discussion y'all were having and all of that. And I was learning a lot. Rob is always dropping some great jewels. And I was hearing some of the things that Jason was talking about as well. Of course, I'm glad to see my boss, Kim, here in the space and all of that. So definitely glad to see all of this great conversation. I was actually listening and having some observations of my own and some thoughts of my own, some that folks may agree with, some that folks may not agree with, and all along those lines. So just some of the things that I was thinking about as I was hearing some of the conversations is, while I understand that we are about to have these autonomous cars and these autonomous vehicles, and I am a non-driver, so I'm looking forward to the day that I can actually get in a car and the car will take me to where I want to go and all of that. But I also have some concerns about that based on some of the limitations that I have seen, because I'm also been one that for the last couple of years, particularly during this pandemic, has been using DoorDash. And I can tell you that DoorDash uses things like Google Navigators and a number of other things. And I think that my apartment complex is fairly easy to navigate. But I can tell you that in the last several months, somehow the Google Navigator and the things that have been programmed don't seem to work all that accurately, because every time I turn around, the drivers are getting lost and they can't seem to find what seems to be a clear direction and a straight line to get to where they should be getting to. So if these are the same people that are going to be programming our autonomous car, I'm worried that if I'm going to my mom's house in Rocky Mount, I may wind up at Rob's house because of some of the things going on and all of that, if they can't get their directions and how to go and all of that. So that's just some of the things that I've seen just based on some of the early conversations and my early dealings with some of the things that y'all are talking about in that space. And I've also been in the metaverse, and I love playing in the metaverse, and I've seen some amazing things in the metaverse. I've seen things that I would never see in a real life. Like I remember doing a New Year's Eve party, and there were people in the metaverse literally in the nightclub setting, doing skateboards and skateboard tricks and going on a unicycle. Try that in a real nightclub and see how far you get and all of that. So it'll be interesting to see how these things go. And the metaverse space, I think we're in a very early invitation of what the metaverse will look like. And I'm hoping that as it develops and gets created, that it becomes more realistic and all of that. But there are some concerns I have about the metaverse as well, because the metaverse can have some scary moments, even in the way that we can have people create kind of avatars and systems that are not their true identity, and definitely can get us into all kinds of trouble and all of that. We've seen that with just people doing the old-fashioned way of scamming people and all along those lines with just the existing things that exist in the computer. And we have definitely seen some predator types that have used that as a tool. And I'm afraid that that can also happen in the metaverse. I'm very much concerned about what we can do to make sure that we are putting some safety precautions, because I know that my boss, Kimberly, is very much about safety and women's rights and things of that nature. So I definitely hope that we have some safety precautions within the new version of the metaverse, so that I'm not saying you're going to stop all bad actors, but that we can at least limit some of those bad actors in that space and all of that. So those were just some of my early thoughts as I was listening to some of the conversation. And I do apologize for coming in late, but we do have that lovely Pod TV network that I am part of along with Kimberly. So I had to make sure that some shows were going well in that space as well. But definitely that's just some of my immediate thoughts and my immediate observations. Like I said, my nephews, have no kid of my own, but my nephews have their Oculus glasses, so I know that they are in the metaverse playing games and things of that nature. And ironically, I talked to some friends of mine in that space, and they're actually thinking that what we are now calling the metaverse will not even be around in the near future. It'll be some other variation or some other thing, because they're thinking that the metaverse might go the way of crypto and all along those lines, in the sense that it might suffer from some drawbacks and some people making some changes within it, because like I said, they're considered this like the early version, and we know, like all early versions, the early version of football looks nothing like the football that we play now and all of that. But I'd love to hear people's thoughts about some of these quick observations of mine that I just made from listening to other people as well. But that's just on my quick thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. This is our 583 episodes, and we are continuously collaborating with different universities, government agencies, and corporations in Asia Pacific. We also have good news. We are also collaborate with Pod TV. So hopefully we will get more audience, because they have a strong audience from around the world. And I request all of our friends, Transhumanist Party, Tando, Pacific Rim Business Councils, Pod TV, all of the groups, we need more support. And I want to share another good news, because World Talent Economy Forums, we are collaborating with one of the largest universities in Malaysia. Today we are collaborate with University Science Malaysia, and hopefully through this we can do more contribution for more science, engineering, and technology. I'm just sharing our collaboration. Actually, I'm in other cities of Malaysia right now. What's happening?
Sweet. See you Friday.
I'm just sharing, just 1 minute.
Cool. So who's this?
Because Mr. Jason, what's your question?
Congratulations.
Who was that? Was that you in there? I didn't get to really see it that good.
That was Sharif.
Just 1 minute. I think there is internet issues. Yes. Thank you.
I think we must be having lag issues or something.
That happens even to the best of us.
Alrighty. So who's on the other side in the debate Friday? Anybody?
When is it on
You want me
Friday?
to debate?
When?
Mr.
Because I'm
Jason,
traveling on Friday. What?
Oh, okay. Mr. Jason, you want to do debate this Friday?
Yeah, I was asking, is there anybody on the other side?
What
I'm
time? What time? I'm always a moderator, but what time?
Same time.
Same time? Okay. I'll
Same time.
I'll
We
try to
start from- yes.
readjust my I'll readjust my travel to be on. Mark, can we get it live on Roku?
I gave him the information, so I don't know if he tried to
I
make
know,
it
but
happen on today's
who else
show,
goes-
but I did give
who
him the
else-
information.
Who else goes live?
Nobody on Friday. What time did you say on Friday?
11.
11 p.m. to 12.
11 on Friday after the news. Nobody is live, so we can go live on Friday after 11.
Yeah.
I mean, at
and
11.
I'm sure you,
And I'll get Nick to promote it. Sharif, if you send some links of the show coming up, the debate, I'll get Nick to start promoting it.
okay, thank you. And we are actually taking a lot of action beside this dialogue. We are doing real research, real collaborations, real partnerships, and a lot of contributions in Asia Pacific. This is one of the largest university, Malaysian Science University. You can see that one of the largest university. We are collaborating and we are sharing our resource, our knowledge with them. They are also sharing their resource, and collaboratively we are doing our training and development as well. So this is the way actually World Talent Economy Forum we are working. We are taking more actions. We are actually supporting the Asia Pacific community. So those who want to support World Talent Economy Forum with your knowledge, with your resources, we always want to welcome all of you. So thank you, Madam Kimberly, Mr. Markley, Dr. Eric, Professor David Smith, and Mr. Jason for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
We ending broadcast. Okay.